This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Algerian Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Attaf has called from Jeddah for a collective position by the member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that rises to the level of the existential challenges facing the Palestinian question. And foreign ministers of the member states of the OIC have expressed their rejection and firm condemnation of the Zionist entity's plan to totally reoccupy the Gaza Strip. And in Gaza, famine still causes more deaths among Palestinian civilians as Reporters Without Borders called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting to end the Israeli massacre of journalists. And participants at the diplomatic forum in solidarity with the Sahrawi people have called on the UN to fulfill its responsibilities in the decolonization of Western Sahara. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. I'm Asia Abukar. Good afternoon. The Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs of the National Committee Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, have called from Jeddah for a collective position by the member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that rises to the level of the existential challenges facing the Palestinian question. Gemma Selmani has the details.
Charged by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Mr. Attaf, in an address delivered at the extraordinary session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of the OIC member states, affirmed that the Palestinian cause faces grave threats requiring a new collective vision to confront regional dangers, stressing that Israel now openly pursues expansion through the so-called Greater Israel Project.
The serious threats facing the Palestinian cause in particular and the Middle East region in general impose on us and on the entire international community to adopt a new perspective to anticipate the outcomes of the situation and to deal with the dangers arising from it. This is the challenge of the hour and the absolute responsibility imposed by the current stage, and this is the collective duty that no other duty matches in precision and sensitivity. For the Israeli occupation itself no longer even bothers to conceal its expansionist plans after its leaders have begun openly proclaiming the revival and activation of what is known as the Greater Israel Project.
Mr. Attaf warned that Israel aims to erase the Palestinian cause and destabilize the region, urging a united collective stance in support of Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt and Jordan.
We are without doubt facing an Israeli drive obsessed with completely eliminating the Palestinian national project and demolishing the pillars of the two-state solution by removing it from minds after persisting in abolishing it on the ground. And we are without doubt also facing an Israeli overwhelming desire to redraw the borders in the region and to tamper with the security and stability of the countries neighboring Palestine and with their territorial sanctity. And we are without doubt likewise facing an Israeli sweeping tendency to impose its whims and its ambitions and even its illusions at the expense of the will of the international community, the warnings and cautions of the United Nations and the resolutions of international legality. From this perspective, we are required to elevate our collective position in word and in deed to the level of these existential challenges on the one hand and to the level of the legendary steadfastness of our brothers in Palestine, in Syria and in Lebanon on the other hand. And from this same perspective, it is incumbent upon us to stand as one alongside the two sister countries, Egypt and Jordan, in view of what the Israeli expansionist project threatens them with.
Mr. Attaf stressed the need to secure a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, prevent its reoccupation or the displacement of its people, and reaffirm it as part of Palestine, while preserving the two-state solution and the establishment of an independent state with Al-Quds as its capital.
Just as much we are keen first to contribute to achieving a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, we must block the path before these schemes aiming to reimpose the sector under the control of the occupation and to displace its population. And just as much we are keen second to contribute to formulating the arrangements for the post-aggression phase on the Gaza Strip, we must work to consolidate the status of this sector as an integral part of the land of the State of Palestine Palestine, and just as much as we are keen, third and finally, to contribute to responding to the urgent priorities of the Palestinian people, we must strive hard to preserve the foundations of the two-state solution and safeguard the pillars of the establishment of the independent and sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital, so as to maintain the prospect of a just, lasting and definitive settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Mr. Attaf concluded by urging the international community to consider sanctions to end the aggression, enforce international law, and avert unprecedented regional risks.
The Organization of the Islamic Cooperation, OIC, during its extraordinary session held in Jeddah, has praised the efforts of the President of the Republic, Mr. Al-Majid Tebboune, in favor of the Palestinian cause. The OIC affirmed support for the notable efforts of Algeria under President Al-Majid Tebboune from its seat as a non-permanent UN Security Council member and during its presidency in favor of Muslim causes in general and the Palestinian cause in particular. The OIC called for support to Algeria and other Muslim non-permanent Security Council members to press the Council to take urgent measures to stop plans to reoccupy Gaza and the war on Palestinians and ensure sustained humanitarian aid amid the UN-declared famine. And the foreign ministers of the member states of the OIC have expressed in their meeting in Jeddah their rejection and firm condemnation of the Zionist entity's plan to totally reoccupy the Gaza Strip. Ms. Sharfi.
The foreign ministers stressed in a declaration that these projects of the Zionist entity are a serious and unacceptable escalation, an attempt to entrench an illegal occupation and impose a fait accompli by force in violation of international law, humanitarian law, human rights, relevant UN resolutions, and the rulings of the International Court of Justice. They held the Zionist entity as the occupying power, fully responsible for the crimes of genocide, the unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe, and the famine raging in the Gaza Strip, and demanded the opening of all crossing points and the immediate and unconditional authorization of the entry of humanitarian aid in sufficient quantity while guaranteeing the freedom of action of relief agencies and international and humanitarian organizations, foremost UNRWA. The OIC foreign ministers called for respect of international humanitarian law, human rights law, and UN resolutions, stressing the need for a responsible international response to the findings of the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification (IPC) adopted by the United Nations, which for the first time officially confirmed the existence of famine in Gaza. They further recalled that lasting peace requires a two-state solution, ending the occupation and establishing an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital.
And in the state of Palestine, medical sources on the ground announced that the death toll in the Gaza Strip has risen to 62,819, the majority of whom are children and women since the start of the Israeli occupation's genocidal war. The sources added that the number of injuries has risen to 158,629 since the start of the aggression, while number of victims remain under the rubble, inaccessible to ambulance crews and civil defense teams. Since down today, 20 citizens have been killed in a series of airstrikes and brutal massacres perpetrated by the occupation in the Gaza Strip. However, with the ongoing brutal bombing, the death toll is expected to rise. In the Gaza Strip, famine still causes more deaths among Palestinians who are already exhausted by the war waged by the Zionists. 3 Palestinians, including 2 children, died within the past 24 hours due to starvation and malnutrition. This brings the total number of the starvation-related fatalities to 303, including 117 children. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip continues to worsen due to the blockade and shortages of food and medical supplies. The occupying authorities sealed off all crossings with the Gaza Strip, blocking the entry of most food and medical aid, further accelerating the spread of famine across the territory. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, has warned that malnutrition among children under 5 doubled between March and June as a result of the ongoing blockade. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and still with the Palestinian thorny issue. The representative of the Hamas movement in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, has affirmed that the targeting of Nasser Medical Hospital in Khan Yunis and the killing of a group of journalists, civil defense personnel and civilians constitutes a crime of contempt for all international conventions, treaties and human rights, urging international bodies to take concrete measures to stop these atrocities.
نحن أمام جريمة مركبة ترتكب على مرأى ومسمع من الجميع.
We are facing a compounded crime committed in full view and hearing of everyone, in which civil defense and ambulance crews, patients and the wounded were targeted in clear contempt for all international customs, conventions and humanitarian law, indeed for humanity as a whole. These journalists are correspondents of international news agencies bearing witness to this crime. These crimes would not have reached such a level of monstrosity and criminality if it wasn't for the occupation's assurance that no sanctions would be imposed on it and that it would continue to benefit from a policy of impunity. What is required is not to describe what is happening, for no words can describe the extent of the brutality taking place and this compounded crime committed this morning. What is required of international institutions, states and organizations is to take practical measures to halt this crime, this arrogance and this sadism and Nazism being perpetrated by the occupation in committing these crimes.
That was the representative of the Hamas movement in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan. And now UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the Israeli occupation's bombing of the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip, which led to the killing of many civilians, including health workers and journalists. Guterres said in a statement read by his spokesman, Stefan Dujarric, that the recent horrific killings highlight the grave risks faced by medical personnel and journalists as they carry out their vital work during this brutal conflict.
The Secretary General strongly condemned the killings of Palestinians today in Israeli strikes that hit Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. Those killed, in addition to civilians, included medical personnel and journalists. These latest horrific killings highlight the extreme risks that medical personnel and journalists face as they carry out their vital work amidst this brutal conflict. The Secretary General recalls that civilians, including medical personnel and journalists, must be respected and protected at all times. He calls for a prompt, impartial investigation into these killings. He reiterates that medical personnel and journalists must be able to perform their essential duties without interference, without intimidation, and without harm, and in full accordance with international humanitarian law.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And the massacres committed by the Israeli occupation of the Nasser Medical Complex, killing 20 people, including 5 journalists, have triggered worldwide condemnations, especially that they were broadcast live to the entire world. Reporters Without Borders, RSF, said that the Israeli occupation deliberately targets journalists, calling for an emergency UN Security Council meeting to end this massacre of journalists. It's set 10 years after the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2222, which protects journalists in times of conflict. The Israeli occupation is flouting its application. Meanwhile, the Speaker of the Arab Parliament, Mohammed Ali Yamahi, described the medical complex massacres as war crimes and full-fledged crimes against humanity. The Spanish Foreign Ministry, for its part, has said that the attack is a blatant and unacceptable violation of a humanitarian law. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the ruthless government of Netanyahu is relentlessly continuing its brutal assaults to destroy everything that belongs to humanity. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the UN has reiterated its warning that the Israeli occupation continues to restrict and obstruct entry of humanitarian aid convoys into the Gaza Strip, hampering life-saving operations. This was stated by the spokesman for the UN Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, at a press conference held in New York.
Less aid means more malnutrition. We and our partners continue to call for the unrestricted flow of humanitarian aid into and throughout Gaza. OCHA warns that aid convoys in Gaza continue to face delays, They continue to face movement restrictions and many other obstacles. Yesterday, out of the 15 humanitarian missions that required coordination, the Israeli authorities facilitated 7, which included the collection of fuel from the Karim Shalom crossing and its distribution to areas where it is needed most. 4 missions had to be either canceled by the organizers or were denied outright by Israeli authorities. The remaining ones were initially approved, but then impeded on the ground and only partially accomplished.
That was the statement of the spokesman for the UN Secretary General Stefan Dujarric. Amnesty International is leading calls for a probe into the Israeli wide-scale destruction of civilian property in southern Lebanon, saying that these actions must be investigated as war crimes. Gemma Selmani tells us more.
The human rights organization said that it found that the Israeli occupation manually laid explosives and bulldozers to devastate civilian structures, including homes, mosques, cemeteries, roads, parks, and soccer pitches across 24 municipalities. A senior director at Amnesty, Erika Guevara Rosas, said in the statement that the destruction had rendered entire areas uninhabitable and ruined countless lives. Amnesty said its analysis from October 2024 to January 2025 showed that more than 10,000 structures were heavily damaged or destroyed during that time by the Israeli ground offensive. It said in some videos, soldiers filmed themselves celebrating the destruction by singing and cheering, adding that much of the destruction was done in apparent absence of imperative military necessity and in violation of international humanitarian law. Amnesty said it sent Israeli occupying authorities questions in late June about the destruction but had not received a response. Rosa said, given the scale of destruction carried out by the Israeli occupation, many residents of southern Lebanon have nothing to return to. Amnesty said Amnesty also urged states to end weapons transfers and other military support to the Israeli occupation.
To the issue of Western Sahara now, participants at the diplomatic forum in solidarity with the Sahrawi people have called from Algiers on the UN to fulfill its responsibilities in the decolonization of Western Sahara, demanding an urgent and thorough investigation into human rights violations in the occupied part of Western Sahara. Mas'ud Sharfi.
Participants expressed satisfaction with the content of the report to be presented by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres during the 80th session of the General Assembly, where he expressed his belief in the possibility of guaranteeing the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. They also welcomed the African Union's firm position, which is redoubling its effort to ensure the exercise of the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. In this context, the diplomatic forum expressed its gratitude and thanks to Algeria for its firm and unwavering position in support of just causes and oppressed peoples struggling for their freedom and independence, especially the Sahrawi and the Palestinian peoples, and to all countries that recognize the Sahrawi Republic. At the conclusion of this meeting, the South African ambassador to Algeria, Mr. Domisu Chinga, assured the press that the forum would continue to mobilize support and provide assistance to the Sahrawi people in their pursuit of their right to self-determination.
We have just finished our monthly meeting as the diplomatic the forum for the support of the Sahrawi people. And our main function is to drum up support, give support to the Sahrawi people, and look at activities on how we can give visible support, and also look at other entities that are giving concrete support. We were pleased indeed to note the very concrete support given by most of our countries which are the members of the forum, the Southern African Development Community, at its summit last week. And also expressed our very appreciation for a memorandum of understanding that has been signed between Southern Africa Development Corporation and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. So these are some of the activities that we are looking at and trying to see to it that we will have activities that will be aligned with other activities that will be done by other entities.
For his part, the ambassador of the Sahrawi Republic to Algeria, Khatri Addouh, reviewed the diplomatic victories achieved recently for the Sahrawi cause at the African and international levels, highlighting the importance of the Memorandum of Understanding concluded by the SADC group with the Sahrawi state. Let's note that the diplomatic forum in solidarity with the Sahrawi people was held at the South African Embassy in Algiers and was marked by the participation of 21 countries.
And with this, we come to the end of our news bulletin. Time now for our program. It is compiled and presented by Mariam Barshi.